Hi, I'm Nicole Ponsford and I am the Southwest Regional Lead for the EdTech Demonstrator Programme, and I'm also the co-founder of the GEC, the Global Equality Collective. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today on this Friday the 13th morning, and the panel today is an absolute blinder. I'm absolutely thrilled by all these incredible people joining us today. We're going to be looking at diversity and inclusion with a backdrop against lockdown and I would say about 10 years of EdTech. So there's lots of different areas around diversity and inclusion we'll be talking about. I'm not entirely sure where the conversation will go, but I know there'll be lots of positive solutions that will come out of it. So what I'm going to do is just go around the group and just ask everyone to introduce themselves. I'm going to do it just in order that everyone's on my screen at the moment. So Steve, do you want to start us off, please?
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name's Stephen Smith. I'm the Customer Success Manager for the Bridge the Divide programme at LGFL.
Fantastic, thank you. And Emma next, please.
Morning, everybody. My name's Emma Darcy. I'm Director of Technology for Learning for the Chiltern Learning Trust, working across 11 schools in Luton and Central Bedfordshire. And I'm also on the leadership team at Denby High School, which is an EdTech 50 school and an EdTech demonstrator school.
Thanks, Emma. Nick, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Nick Dennis. I'm a Director of Studies at an independent school in Hertfordshire. I'm also a Fellow of the Schools History Project, which is the England's premier think tank for historical education.
Thanks, Nick. Can I now go to Sky and then Amira from Basingstoke College, please?
Morning all, my name's Sky Caves. I'm a Senior Learning Technologist at Basingstoke College of Technology, so we're a general further education vocational college in the southeast of England.
Hello everybody, I'm Amiras and I'm a Learning Technologist Apprentice, and we are one of the EdTech Demonstrator colleges.
Thanks very much. And then I'm not sure we've got Marion yet, but Harmeet, would you mind being the other EdTech demo bookend to this introduction, please?
Sure. Hi, my name's Harmeet Sahota. I'm a part-time senior leader at Queensmead School in Northwest London. I'm also the regional lead for the EdTech demo programme in Yorkshire and Humber side in the Northeast. And I'm also the founder of Curriculum Wide,
which is very exciting, and we will be diving into that as well, Harmeet, as well. So this is the panel that we've got for this morning. We have Dr. Marion Leans, I hope will join us very shortly as well. We have comments. We would like you guys to ask us questions. We would like all the really hard questions, please. As hard and difficult as you can possibly throw at us, please, and we will do our best. What I'm going to ask the panel to do as well as we carry on this chat, anything that they're involved in that they would like to share, any things that they think that the conversation's pushing their little minds towards that they can share with you. So I want this to be a sort of a packed 45 minutes, lots of information, more than you can shake a stick at. So what I do just to start us off with it is talk about what accessible tech means to us. Yesterday at the 4 o'clock tea and chat, the wonderful Neil Beck, one of the Southwest demonstrators, National Star, and Bal Harris did a whistle-stop tour around what accessible tech is in terms of SEND, disability and anti-ableism. But what I wanted to do in this kind of follow-up session is look a little bit more around the diversity gaps that have come, I think, a little bit more to the, I don't know, to the front of the conversations. I mean, even this morning when I was looking on Twitter, there's information going out and a bit of confusion about COVID cases with disabilities, that there's been a few conversations about the term BAME. So I feel at the moment, this panel, we've got an awful lot that we can kind of start to look at. So what I was going to do is ask a few questions. I'm pretty sure we're going to go off piece pretty quickly, but that's absolutely fine too. So what I thought I might do is start with maybe Steve. And if you could talk to us about the work that you're doing with Bridge the Divide, and then sort of how that, I don't know, that is helping with accessibility and technology at the moment, please.
Absolutely, thank you. Yes, so accessibility in the sort of economic sense is probably what we're dealing with at Bridge the Divide at the moment. As many of you will know, LGFL's sort of mission is the advancement of education, and we've got a history of sort of adding value to what we're giving to schools to try and make sure that they've got everything that they need. So providing, alongside our broadband offering, safeguarding and filtering tools, and loads of teaching and learning resources that are particularly ones that are based for inclusion. One of the things that came to light very quickly in COVID really was the fact that schools and children's access to learning was very much dependent on whether they had computers at home and the economic background that they found themselves in. And so LGFL launched a scheme. We decided to try and put our money where our mouth is, really, and to make sure that we can get schools technology at the best possible prices. So one of the things that we found is obviously that big schools and big MATs had big buying power, and so they were able to get devices at lower pricing than the small one-form entry schools that actually often were operating in areas with the highest need. So what we did is we've launched a procurement to market where we went out and we did a procurement based up to 1 million devices to get absolutely the best possible prices in the marketplace that we could, and meaning that schools can order things through us. So Chromebooks and Winbooks, very much the entry-level devices, so that we can get the best, the most devices out into the hands of the most learners out there, and meaning that school can only afford to buy one, then they can buy one at the same price that an academy trust that could buy 1,500 could access them at. So we felt that was really important from an economic point of view. At the moment, we're on track to save, on the orders that we've got at the moment, about £6 million worth of savings for schools based on what's come in. So that's really, really positive. And obviously, that's money that's directly available back into the education system for schools to be able to use. The next steps for us is to address this sort of the big part of the problem, which is accessibility to broadband at home. It's not just about the devices, it's about having access to broadband. And we're really, really aware that the possibilities out there for that at the moment are quite difficult. What we're doing at the moment is we're out to the marketplace, really pushing to get a really good value 4G solution or 5G solution for schools to be able to offer out to parents. And we're hopeful to be able to conclude that in the next few weeks, to be able to really go out with an offer to schools for that. Alongside that, we're offering a product called Home Protect, and that's available free of charge to any school in the country at the moment for the next 6 months at least. And that is basically a tool to make sure that your filtering on any devices that you're sending home is exactly the same as you've got in school. So you can configure your Chromebooks or your Winbooks, send them home safe in the knowledge that when children are accessing, whether they're accessing it in a cafe because that's the only place they can get an internet connection, or off a 4G tether to a mobile phone, that they're getting really high quality filtering, and so that the quality of the connection they're managing to get is not limiting how safe that is. So we thought that was really important. So as I say, so economic inclusion is something that we're really, really pushing, and hopefully this scheme will be able to help with that.
No, absolutely. And I think the digital divide in terms of economic pressures has been something that's been well documented in the States, but it's been, I think, pushed a little bit forward with COVID, because as one of my good friends, Kaz Keep, said back at the start, you can't teach who you can't reach. And I just wondered, with the panel on that, hopefully, we'll have Dr. Marian Lees is going to talk about the Wi-Fi, but in terms of the devices, has anyone got any sort of solutions, or what's their story been around that issue? Emma, would you like to, yeah.
Yeah, so I find it really interesting hearing Stephen speak, actually, because we've made full use of the London Grid for Learning device scheme. I mean, we've been running a one-to-one access scheme in a number of our schools now for the past few years, and I'll put my cards on the table and say I would love for the government to provide every child in the country with a device. we can't wait for that to happen, you know, if it ever does. So, you know, we looked at alternative routes, and so we had been doing one-to-one device scheme for the last 3 years at one of our schools and for the last 2 years at another one. But the problem we found this year is it's not even just been accessibility to devices, it's been getting hold of the devices themselves, because there's been such huge demand and so many schemes going on. It's actually been really hard for us, for example, to sort of find Chromebooks in the sort of numbers that we've needed. And the London Grid for Learning scheme for us has been absolutely fantastic, because it's meant that across the 3 schools that we have that run these schemes, we've been able to source those devices and within realistic timescales as well. Because we found with some of our families, it's not even whether or not you have a device at home. You know, lockdown has meant that where you have families with sort of large numbers of people working from home, you might have a device in the household, but it might be that mum or dad needs to use that for work and the children can't use it for school. So it's been a much more, the whole idea of a digital divide this year, I think, has become much more complicated and multi-layered than perhaps it's been in other years. And I mean, I could talk about that for hours, but I know we've got lots of panelists on here, so I'll stop talking now.
No, I do understand. And what's been interesting to me is that for me, I was one of those parents. I've got twin 4-year-olds and he's just turned 10-year-old, and the one laptop I've got is this one. So then looking at how I did that with my children was very difficult. And I wouldn't say that I'm, you know, an underserved, you know, disadvantaged person, but actually accessibility to those devices came through. I mean, Steve, you must be thrilled to hear that Emma's sort of saying that we did this and it worked. I take it you've probably got quite a few stories about that, but people not quite believing that they could do this for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot of devices out in schools now, which is really great. But as Emma, you know, alluded to, the challenges have been huge. The demand is absolutely unprecedented at the moment for technology, and we're working with, you know, directly with manufacturers who are telling us that, you know, normally they'd expect a month maybe to get a device built, and it's now taking, you know, literally months for devices to be done because of COVID, but also because of the challenges put in place by the American government deciding to ban chip manufacturers in the supply chain, which again meant that a lot of the suppliers have had to basically rebuild their supply chains from the beginning, which is a challenge. But yeah, there's just so many. What we've done, the way that we've tried to address that is placing massive orders as far ahead as we can, so that the lead time is as minimal for the schools when they place them as we can do. But yeah, even with doing that, it's a massive challenge. Yeah, and it's fantastic. So we're going to put some of those links in the comment section for people to see. So would anyone else like to talk about any solutions that they've had in terms of devices? Sky, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, just to jump in, it's not so much with regards to procurement for devices, but as Emma articulated, we struggled with getting hold of enough devices, and we had households where they were sharing one device, and we had students needing to get online for a lesson whilst their parents are on a video call for work. So from a technologist perspective, we looked a lot at what we can do to provide online learning experiences that could be done via mobile. So again, not necessarily just looking at, like, obviously getting the devices in place was one side of it, but we also thought, okay, well, we can't just wait until we have enough devices to give the students. We need to look at what we can do to ensure that they still have access in the meantime. And because we're a further education college, most of our students do have smartphones or parents who have smartphones. So we put a big focus on helping our teachers to develop learning, develop lessons which were accessible via mobile. So yeah, that was a sort of another approach that we took.
Fantastic. Harmeet, I was just about to come to you actually. We must be like telepathy working.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, we're really fortunate. We've got over 800 Chromebooks at our school, but it's about taking a step back and looking at the wider savings, because what LGFL have provided here is absolutely brilliant. And we've had Chromebooks for over 5 years, and the price we've bought some Lenovo's now on the scheme is cheaper than the first ever Chromebook we bought 5 years ago. But those Chromebooks are still going strong, and it's about a wider strategy, because those Chromebooks are paid for themselves, and we've made so many savings through buying these devices. And you know, as I said, we're quite fortunate that we had these devices, and when lockdown came about, as SLT, we were all delivery drivers, giving them to our students. But for the last 2 years, you know, we use our pupil premium funding, and every child who is pupil premium gets offered a device, a one-to-one device. And on top of that, we struck a deal with Vodafone, who were providing our broadband. But it's great to see it coming through now. And as Emma mentioned, you know, it should be led from the government rather than us as an individual school going out and contacting every mobile provider. So it's really, you know, this is one of the positives from the pandemic. But yeah, it's about taking it further and making sure that it's not just our schools that are leading the way, that all of them can actually have access, and that's where the Bridge the Divide scheme is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Hamid, what I wanted to do, I want to kind of move quite quickly through the topic so we all get a little bit of time to talk, is that moving away from the devices is actually trying, as Sky was saying, to make the curriculum more inclusive. And I think at this time, I have very mixed feelings about what remote education is and what mixed delivery, and actually what the learning outcomes are for students when they're self-isolating, and particularly around the first lockdown. And I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about your work around curriculum wide and what you're doing to help teachers reach out to those students.
Yeah, absolutely. So curriculum wide was developed in response to the volume of exclusions and the number of student needs not in education, employment or training. If I go back to 2014, 2015, when the English Baccalaureate was introduced, our permanent exclusions were around 4,700, and last year they were 7,900. And I saw a correlation between that. Schools were going down the route of the English Baccalaureate. The number of vocational courses were being dropped because of fears of not performing in school league tables. So that was the idea behind curriculum wide being born. And really and truly, it's about getting schools to think about offering inclusive curriculums. The number of hairdressing courses and motor mechanics courses, construction, and all of those courses, they've all been dropped. And at curriculum wide, we offer there's 13,000 courses that all schools can choose from. There's filters to choose from your whether it's level 1, level 2 course, subject areas, whether it counts towards performance tables. But really and truly, it's about putting students at the centre of the curriculum rather than just forcing students to sit in a Spanish lesson or a French lesson, because schools want to push their league table performance. So that was the idea behind curriculum wide. And interestingly, in terms of what impact it's had on since the pandemic, I was speaking to one of my demo schools, Darlington College, the way they've managed it, because they've got a lot of vocational courses, they've got a rota, they've got schools coming in on a fortnightly basis, because everyone's working from home in that school. Schools are all fully, sorry, the students are they're part of the distance learning program there, and fortnightly they're having to get students in so they can actually perform the practical side of the course. So those are the different challenges that they're facing in terms of response to the pandemic. But it is more the colleges who are more open, who do offer all of these vocational courses. But I think it's really sad that our mainstream schools are focused on the performance tables, and as a result, you know, it's an 83% increase. And actually the fixed term exclusions last year were 438,000.
Wow.
And it was 239,000 in 2015. So there is a correlation there between you know, what students are being taught in the curriculum.
Absolutely. And I think then if you drill down into that and you looked at certain elements of the Equalities Act, I'm pretty sure that you would be getting some pretty heavy demographics that wouldn't surprise some of the people on this. I'm really thrilled because I think Dr. Marion Lean has joined us. What I'd like to do is, we were talking about devices, but Marion, I'd like to, we can probably introduce you, and if you could talk to us a little bit about the Rural Gigabit programme and how that is helping with accessibility at the moment. Is Marion there? Okay, we'll come back to you in a moment. If we go back to what Harmeet was saying about sixth form and the kind of wider areas of the curriculum, I'd be quite keen now to, I think, go to Nick and talk to you about how have you been trying to help with accessible technology with the backdrop of COVID in your setting?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a number of things, and really on the devices, before we, I get into the curriculum piece, I think what the whole situation has shown us is the weakness around strategy and planning that across the whole system. And it's great that like London has London Grid for Learning, but if you're not within that particular setting, what do you have, or you don't have the expertise in your particular schools, because that's not been a main thing. And what Harmeet mentioned around the league tables, and that has caused pressure to think about a very narrow form of education and not around academic qualifications. And there's a big debate about the kind of assessment systems that we should use. So all these things are intertwined. And I think the other thing to kind of give some context before I get into the curriculum comments is, there's been a very much focus on the curriculum as a academic qualification and moving away from EdTech as providing a way of supporting that. And we're in this situation, we're in this hole at the moment, and it's causing some real problems. I think how we've used devices, we surveyed all the students, and I have to give thanks to my former colleague who was working in Hong Kong, and I was following the information that was happening there from December and January, and started planning already to think about what we needed to do. So we surveyed all the students, we asked what they had at home, and we basically said, well, here's the equipment that we could look at as well to support them. And as Sky mentioned before, we tried to make sure that it was device agnostic. So if you had your mobile phone, you could do that. Or if you needed to print something out in the morning and you had your live video lessons, it was running through a particular platform, you could do that too. So we tried to really think about how could it be accessible for everyone. And one of the things we were looking at is making sure if you were hearing impaired, for example, that you could actually access the lesson. So that also helped drive that decision. So that's what I mean by the strategy piece, in terms of making sure all these things are linked together. In terms of thinking about the curriculum, I think there are two things here, as we mentioned, around the kind of inclusive piece, making sure people can access that, and if they're actually there at the time. And we spoke about people having dongles and various other things to help them, but in terms of actually what's being taught and how that's being delivered, and that's a real pedagogical question. And I think all of this it comes down to, it's not the tech so much, it's always the people using it. So if they are thinking about it in a very intentional way, then it's it's a tool, and it's only as good as the person or the organisation that's using it, really. So there is a big emphasis, I think, that we have tried to do, and I know talking to other schools have tried to really focus on individual students and thinking about them, from their kind of journey, like, when they go to sleep at night or wake up in the morning, what do they have to do, and trying to work out the different steps that we would need to take. So Nick, you mentioned the issue around that, you're very tech savvy, and but there's lots of kind of demand for the devices. So we looked at that from a kind of a wider piece around the curriculum. I think the last few months, as well as the coronavirus, has shown that there is some serious curriculum thinking that needs to be done around inclusivity generally and diversity. And I can speak about the work that we have been doing at the Schools History Project, for example. So one of the things that we've tried to make it very inclusive is to, there's been a lack of teaching African history in schools. And this was, it's a major issue. We've known about this before. Lots of people have done some really great work in this area, but it's about making sure that's shared. So I worked with Dr. Toby Green from King's College London, who's written a fantastic book, A Fistful of Shells, about West African history. It is pretty amazing. And Dr. Trevor Getz from San Francisco State University. And, you know, I just said, well, I'd like to talk to you about the work that you're doing. And, you know, we decided that we'd make it a webinar series. So there are 4 or 5 webinars, you know, for an hour and a half that we delivered, and which were available. We had, you know, up to 200, 300 people joining in across the country. And it was a great way to really enrich the curriculum discussion and train staff who may not have access to the curriculum experts. And also, but to think about it in a pedagogical point of view. So one of the really great things, as well as having Trevor and Dr. Green talking about the work that he's doing, is that we had a PhD student from Yale, who's, you know, the world leading authority on construction of houses in this particular area, talking to people. And Zainab Badawi, the BBC presenter, who's also chair of the Royal African Society, was involved in that as well. And what that has meant, the tangible effects, has been that students are now experiencing a much more diverse curriculum in their classrooms, or, you know, physically, or even outside, if it's delivered remotely, which didn't exist before. And that, you know, there's always CPD, but it's not necessarily been delivered in that particular way. It's not necessarily been focused or bringing the real experts who can think about it from an academic point of view, but a pedagogical point of view. And really finding an area where there is an absence of information at school level. I'm not saying it exists elsewhere, and delivering that. So the technology was really great and really helpful for us to actually produce that information. And it's now available on the website. I'll send that in the chat a bit later. But that has been a really good way of providing a more diverse and rich and rigorous curriculum, especially for history students, than existed before. And the technology allowed us to do that.
No, absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. I mean, one of the things for those who, you know, what I'm up to in my kind of my side hustle of the Global Equality Collective is, during lockdown we were able to get funding and build our new membership mark, all through lockdown, all done remotely. Kat, my co-founder, and I do it all. We've met in real life 6 times now in 2 years. We do it all remotely, and we've brought work such as Nick's work into it to help other teachers as well. So I'm a real tech for good lover, but we need to have the tech there in the first place. So Marion, lovely to see you. And I'd like to bring you in at this point, because it's all very well as talking about devices and curriculums, but if we don't actually have any Wi-Fi, it's quite a big problem, isn't it? So I just wonder if you could introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing, please.
Hi, good morning. I hope everyone can hear me. Of course, accessible technology, and I couldn't work out Teams because we don't use Teams. But I'm here. So I'm a design research analyst at Building Digital UK, which is UK government telecoms organisation. So I've been working quite closely with Department for Education on the Rural Gigabit Connectivity Programme, which essentially provides funding for infrastructure for rural schools to be able to get better internet, and it's usually a gigabit capable technology. So my interest in kind of accessible tech is really the key is in that word access, and it's, as you said, we can't really try out all these new exciting technologies. We can't even think about remote learning if you can't even get online. Yes, so kind of I feel like I'm at the very beginning of that journey, as opposed to being able to even look at those Chromebooks or any of those nice tools that we've got. But even as we've heard already this morning, yeah, there's nice technologies, and it could be great internet, but it's not about the technology, it's about the people. And you know, you can have the fastest internet in the world, but if you are too old for ICT, as I've heard in some interviews recently, that's a cultural issue, and that's something that there's a sense of confidence. It's a mindset that needs to be fostered within that school community to be able to give people the kind of feelings that they want to get involved, and that they can. Yeah.
Absolutely. And do you know what I mean? I think the project you're doing is brilliant, and please share it in the chat, and we can get more people to see kind of what you're doing. But actually, when I've got the Equality Act and those 9 characteristics in my head, but it's interesting you sort of say about age, because I think some of the issues around tech and those kind of stereotypes about people being at different ages and what they can bring into this can be a barrier. So what have you found through talking to schools? That has people sort of length in service and education, has that been a barrier, do you think, where people aren't used to using technology, and are the younger generation sort of coming in using it more, would you say?
I think it goes like, this is a few I've been to recently, our rural stuff in Scotland, where they don't even have Wi-Fi, and if you don't have Wi-Fi, you're not able to experiment, you're not going to try it with new products because you just don't have the confidence. And that's, I keep saying, you could set up things on the computer, but because you have to be plugged into the internet, it's actually not that useful. So if you don't have technology, then you're not going to get used to it. And this is the same school where I heard, I've been teaching for 100 years and I'll never get used to it. And it's really nice to get used to it if you don't have the opportunity to even give it a go. And that is actually one of the schools on our programme. So I'll be following up with them and we're finding out it hasn't made a difference. But I have to say, like, this is a school where they had really good attendance, really good kind of behaviour. They live nice and do very well. And I just wonder, is technology going to make a difference, or perhaps they're actually doing quite well with it?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think I'd like to go to some of the younger versions. I was going to say the younger people on our panel, which Sky and Amira, and talk about how you've been finding sort of use of technology, either sort of within the setting or communicating with your students and kind of your peers. Sky, what sort of things have you noticed, would you say? And then it'll come to you, Amira.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we talk about a lot on our team is that we shouldn't assume that all young people are technologically able. I think that's an assumption that's incorrect, and it's something that I've always been quite aware of, because myself, I didn't grow up particularly technologically able, and I wouldn't consider myself a tech person. So when I started college and we were using technology and things, I had a very steep learning curve myself. So we do make sure that we do a digital induction every year, and we aim that for people with all levels of digital capabilities, because whilst we see great benefit in using technology and using EdTech, we need to ensure that everybody has the basic skills to access these. And it would be wrong to assume that everybody, just because they're a teenager and they've grown up with tech around them, that they already have those skills. And it particularly excludes people from particular socioeconomic backgrounds, or people who've moved to the UK and who English isn't their first language, and trying to use technology on top of learning that. We need to stop these assumptions that we have digital natives, so that's something that we're quite keen to make sure that we're aware of. Every time we introduce something, we create very in-depth training resources for our students. We don't just assume, they're teenagers, they'll pick it up.
Oh, brilliant. And I think the more these conversations about what these stereotypes are and actually how these labels sort of damage and are barriers, the more we start to unpack what we're trying to say and personalize things a little bit more. Amira, what would you say about sort of your experience, and how have you been using tech in your setting to be more inclusive?
Oh, I was not a technology person at all in my childhood. And when I saw things working around me, I was very keen to know how it works. So I think Sky has covered almost everything about how we use tech for our students. But one thing I need to cover here is that we introduced Sanctuary in 2018 in our college. And students are using Sanctuary to revise English and maths at their own pace. And one of our students, James, and he's 81 years old, he has passed GCSE English at the age of 81. So it's quite interesting.
That's excellent. Oh, what a good story. Well done. I like that. I think going back to the kind of the gaps and the divides as well, Emma, I'd be kind of keen to talk to you about around gender equality and kind of any gaps that you think the technology is helping to kind of plug, either with students or with maybe some of the female members in your staff.
I think that in terms of the I think when we're talking about those sort of things, it's important to sort of have a little bit of a quick conversation about the roles in tech, because obviously the idea about sort of motivating people to begin to use technology is the reason for it and the purpose for it, isn't it? And on a basic level, it's obviously accessing schoolwork, accessing resources, as we've done over sort of lockdown and things, but also it's a wider conversation around being able to, what does that use of technology lead to? What are those careers? What are those aspirations that go beyond just using the technology as a tool? And one of the things that we really try and do at Denby is sort of obviously look very highly at aspiration for our young women, and looking at the sort of roles that are available for them in the technology industry. And we do that. I mean, obviously we have to do that sort of we do careers advice and guidance for all our students, the same as all schools do. But we also link in with programs like the Apps for Good program, which I know Nick's heard me talk about before, which is a free program for schools. Directly links your students with experts working in those industries. So, for example, they take part in a national competition to create an app that solves a real world problem, but as part of that, they get an opportunity to actually speak to industry experts. So, for example, we've had our young women working with Spotify, for example, in the past, in a sort of Women in Technology Day. Actually having a chance to sort of see how women have got into those different careers in technology, the path that they've taken. I mean, in terms of access to technology, we haven't seen the digital divide being gender specific in that way. It's been, you know, where we've looked at our communities and our school communities, it's been more sort of across the board. But it is that idea then about, if you were to start to drill down and look at, for example, which students are taking computer science, for example, that's where you're going to start to see those gaps emerging, where those particular interests are, how those women identify as what they're going to do as a future career. That's where you then start to see those gender gaps. I'm quite proud of the fact that in terms of access to the technology, we don't have those gaps, but when you drill down, that's where they start to appear more.
Absolutely, and I think I've been looking recently, because primary schools are really good at engaging students with technology, and it kind of does drop off from key stage 3, and then it kind of keeps going, and then we get those kind of lack of pathways. But I think it's also, there's been an awful lot of talk about gender, but there's not necessarily been look at the other areas, and I feel a bit uncomfortable saying disadvantaged. I think I prefer to say underserved, because I think that changes the kind of where we're looking at it. But I think with sort of, you know, less than 10 minutes to go, what would be really good is just to go around and just to get another sort of bite-sized bit of information from everyone, either about if there's some tech that you've used that's been inclusive, or some suggestions that you've got for those people watching. What would you would say, where would you say that they would kind of go? I will obviously end it by saying they need to come to the EdTech demonstrator programme, and we'll do a little bit on that. And I would also say, if you are trying to do the what next for diversity and inclusion, you would come to the GEC and see what we're doing. But we'll see what you guys have, what you say is a kind of a final thoughts almost. So Harmeet, can I come to you? What would you say that you think has been particularly useful as a way of addressing inclusion?
Hello, yeah, sorry. In terms of addressing inclusion, I'm just going to say, just, you know, going back a step to your pastoral teams and really understanding the background of every child. I'm sure it's been covered on all of the conversations and panels we've had, you know, knowing where there's larger families and they've only got one device between 5 or 6 people, knowing those that have got a difficult background and you know, the challenges they're facing in terms of mental health and well-being, and then the wider challenges in terms of just accessibility when you're using technology as well, and providing students that sort of support, whether it be through an injury and they're using voice typing and or whether it's EAL. There's so many elements to this, but I really think that we are reactive, and it's really difficult, you know. Yesterday you have a positive case, and then another member of staff needs to go home, and it's really hard to find the time. But I think we're in a real reactive situation, and it is just putting that time aside, take a step back and really think about, right, no, this isn't just getting in teams and classroom, but how can we really utilize this? How can we be more inclusive for all of our students? How can we use tech to our advantage? How can we make it work for us as a school? And that's really and truly where I think the EdTech demo program is really useful. You know, talk to the experts. You know, we try and do this ourselves and try and find solutions when there's, you know, there's great practice taking place everywhere. So that's what I'd say. Take a step back and put a strategy in place.
Thank you, that's excellent. And Amira, we haven't really talked about your story, but your story is pretty amazing, and how you've been at one of the demonstrators, Basingstoke College, and your journey over the last few years. And we're coming to this last few minutes, but would you quickly mind just sharing kind of what that journey's been, and how the setting you at has helped you actually come to this point where you're now talking on this panel?
Yeah, basically I'm from Pakistan, and I came here in 2017 in February, and I've been in this country just for 3 years, and I've done my BTech extended diploma in IT from Reading College, and then I was looking for a job, and due to Corona there was no job. So one of my teacher, Anshi, she suggested me and asked me to apply for Basingstoke College of Technology, and because they were appointing learning technologies apprentices, and I went for the interview, and they selected me. And I really want to talk about diversity and inclusion as well, because to me, diversity and inclusion mean empowering everybody's voice and appreciating each other's differences. We are a largely female team in technology, and that isn't always the case. You know, we have got a principal who is mixed race, and we have managers who have different ethnicities, different backgrounds, and are from different countries. And that's kind of lovely, because we have different views, different voices, and different perspectives, which improves everything. I think in a team, difference is a power, you know, superpower. And in our team meetings, we all talk, we all share, we all type, we all have different perspectives and views, and we all are very different to each other. And you know, that diversity is so important. And as a college, we are pretty good for being diverse, because it gives us new innovative ideas. It's just, if it's just the same people making the same decisions, nothing changes. You know, most managers, they say, I'm the boss, and this is what we're gonna do, this and that. That way, nothing's gonna change. But we as a team, what we do is we do everything in a collaborative doc, and everybody feeds in, and we say, yes, we did this, and this is ours. So we are quite good in that sense, and I think everybody should work like this, and this is how we're going to improve.
Do you know what? Hats off, absolutely. I absolutely believe, and I'm doing all I can to help that as well. I think what happened, and it's, do you know, I think it's World Kindness Day today as well. So I'm forgetting it's the Friday the 13th and focusing on World Kindness Day. And I think actually a lot of settings that I taught who are using technology and are, you know, one of the things that EdTech Demonstrator Programme is doing, we're trying to ensure that we are representing, you know, the country in terms of our teachers and our diversity and inclusion, is even if you feel that you are in, you know, the whitest, most affluent area in the UK, there's no reason why you should not still be considering what the diversity and inclusion are of those around you, of your students, of their families, of your supply chains. I mean, there's loads of different which ways you can do. So even if you don't think that you're promoting those things, you should be. And I think that openness, what you say, Amira, of having different voices to talk to about things like this panel illustrating to us, that difference very much is a superpower. I think we're going to get that on t-shirts now. Difference is a superpower.
Yeah, that's quite good.
Thank you. We have had a question that's come in about interested to hear experiences regarding using technology to support learners with complex needs and autisms. I would say that we're not going to have time to really address that at the moment. There was Neil's session yesterday, which all these chats are being recorded, so you can view them afterwards. And on the EdTech Demonstrator webpage, we do have a special needs area, and we have Accessible Tech Thursdays every Thursday. Neil from National Star is putting on incredible, absolutely incredible webinars for either your SEND specialists therapists, etc., or for mainstream teachers. And I would say, even if you don't think you've got many SEND students, there's probably a teacher in your team who has got needs that they could benefit from these assistive technologies. Nick, you didn't go to a fire alarm. I'm a bit worried you're going to get in trouble now. But is there anything that, like one thing you would say about how people can use technology to be more inclusive?
Well, the fire alarm wasn't for me, it was for Sky, who had to disappear. So I just think in terms of being inclusive is to think about the people part first. You know, the devices are really important. I know sometimes that's one of the things we get bogged down, but thinking about the people and planning for that. You know, we've mentioned digital plumbing, but that's one of the things that normally gets dropped off because we just think about the devices and say, let's give them to people. But it's really understanding the needs that the community that you're trying to serve have. And if you understand that, then whatever you know, strategy you put in place, or using devices, or thinking about learning the kind of pedagogy, how it's being delivered, is going to be much better as a result. Absolutely, thank you very much. Steve, anything that you would like to add to this about using tech to be inclusive? Anything else you want to mention?
Yeah, just one thing to add really, as I say, is lots of schools and people at home have got lots of just devices that are just lying around that, you know, they're running Windows XP was the last time they ran them, and they're just not working anymore. So there's tools out there such as something called Neverware, which is really good. You can basically take your old technology where maybe the battery doesn't work anymore, or, you know, and it's grind into a halt, and you can install that on all computers and sort of basically bring them back to life as a Chromebook, which will give you access to getting on and using things on the web. So it's really worth considering that. It's free for home users, and if you're an LGFL subscribing school, then you get 30 licenses for that included in your subscription. So it's worth having a look at that, I'd say.
That's brilliant, thank you. Marion, is there anything that you'd suggest at this point as well that you think people could do?
Hi, yeah, I feel like I'm learning lots from you guys, and yeah, I'm definitely going to look at that, because I definitely have some old devices lying around. One thing I would say, again, I don't know about using the technology to help with this, but really thinking about empowering people in the classroom. So having that digital champion, having someone who can kind of take on board whether it's the safety issues or the actual learning of how to use the devices. I don't know where this fits in, but I had heard programs like is it barefoot computing? So I'm often new to this, so I would like to hear also what other people have used to learn more about it, but having people who you trust being able to come in and talk more about the products and kind of fostering that sense of yeah, trust, I think is a big word.
Thank you. Emma, anything you'd add?
Just really echoing a couple of points that have been said already. Things like strategy is incredibly important, and that's where the EdTech demonstrator program can support your school if you're not comfortable with that. People absolutely at the heart of all of it, and training for those people so that they know how to be accessible and how to make the technology more accessible, and really putting systems in place, whatever system you choose, whether it's Google or Microsoft or Apple or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Just making sure that it's something that's going to work on a range of devices, that you're not going to restrict people's access because it only works on certain devices or it only works in a certain way. Flexible systems are really, really important.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much. What an amazing panel. And I'm going to come and stalk you all and pick at your brains again. For those people that are watching this either on Friday or in the future, please feel free to contact any of us and all of us. You can do that via EdTech Demo. You could do that by myself at Nicole Ponsford, or we will be sharing those details as well as all the links and all the work that we're doing. And I would really encourage you, if you haven't already, please check out the EdTech Demonstrator Programme for schools and colleges, running until March at this point, with free support for all schools and colleges nationwide. And thanks very much, everyone. That's it from us. Bye.